Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. We are going to get started in just 1 second. Chad's going to get us kicked off here.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to IEC's Agricultural and Food Systems Priority Town Hall. We have had several calls earlier in the year to align these priorities with partners, and tonight we're going to discuss what our final priorities ended up being for next year's legislative season.
Next slide, Kate.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Hey everyone, can you all hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right, I'm Kate Colwell. Thank you all so much for joining us today. I'm a senior policy manager here at IEC, managing our state to federal work, but I also have the pleasure of supporting our ag and conservation team. And so I'm going to kind of just share about IEC, the work that we do, kind of just ground us a little bit. And you all kind of get to know like who IEC is and who we represent as well. So if you're unfamiliar, IEC stands for the Illinois Environmental Council. We are a statewide advocacy organization where we bring together more than 130 environmental, community-based, agricultural, and food system partners. And so this year we're actually celebrating 50 years of doing this work. And we've served as a trusted voice here in Springfield, in Chicago, and just all across Illinois. And our main goal right now and for 50 more years, hopefully to come, is to continue to protect our air, our water, our land, public health through strong coalition building, strategic legislative advocacy, as well as deep community engagement. And so I'm proud to say that our work spans across every level of government now. We are directly engaging with lawmakers. Hopefully you'll get to hear from one soon. We directly engage with agencies as well as local leaders to make sure that we're advancing those policies that strengthen sustainable agriculture, protect our natural resources, as well as build equitable food systems that serve all of Illinoisans here. At the heart of our mission, I like to say that we have a commitment to sustainable agriculture, to environmental justice, and all of our environmental policies, but also making sure that we serve as a trusted community voice. So I'm truly grateful to be in community with you all today. I hope something is learned here. I hope whatever is shared here, you're able to take away and apply that to the different organizations that you represent as well. And so happy to dive into food systems. It's led by Rural Affairs Director Chad Wallace, and incredible speakers that will be joining us and talking about their work and our policy priorities for 2026 as well. I'm not sure if we have Senator Kaler on, but that's okay. We'll just start going over with our priorities if that's okay, and then we'll start with our speaker and have him join after.
Yeah, I was going to flag that Senator Kaler isn't on, but he's an incredible champion for local food issues and has been for years here in Illinois. We were really grateful to have his support both for some of our bills this year and for this webinar. So if he joins a little later, we might rearrange the agenda and let him say a few words about our local food work this year. But with that, we'll turn it over to Chad, our Rural Affairs Director, to introduce our priorities and our first speaker, which is Chad. So maybe I should introduce him. I'll turn it over to Chad and let him tell you a little bit about himself. You're muted, Chad.
All right, sorry about that. Thank you, Kate and Lindsay. And I am Rural Affairs Director for Illinois Environmental Council. I'm happy to share our priority livestock reform portion of the town hall this evening. And next slide, please. So conventional agriculture in Illinois has in some aspects been failing and contributing to a lot of the adverse effects that we are having in our environment here in Illinois. Current regulations are not only allowing the system to continue, but they are allowing it to thrive. Currently for this year, I believe we are right around 85 livestock operations have been cited and approved by Illinois Department of Ag. And that is without any input from local folks who have to live and deal with the circumstances that these operations bring to the state. Sustainable meat production is incredibly difficult to operate. And in the industry, if you're not in the industry, you're going to struggle. I know that I personally, I've been a lifelong farmer. I had the option to go the commercial route, industrial route, so to speak. It just wasn't right for me or my farm. But I have had many hurdles because of it. The industry is for the industry. I don't have things such as guaranteed myself and everyone else that's farming like I do. We don't have guaranteed processing. Processing after COVID became very unreliable. And if you can't get your stuff processed, you can't get it to the folks and you can't get your dollars that keep you thriving. Um, they also money if a new farmer wants to come in to this wants to do a pastured operations. A lot of times the money is not available due to the fact that they can't guarantee the protections that are needed for them to feel confident in providing the money for these operations. So outside of the industry, very difficult, let alone the amount of time it takes to do the operation in that way. You have increased cost due to that. And so you're constantly trying to create value in your product when you're selling it to folks because there's a drastic difference between the price of a sustainable project being grown and the industrial system. Next slide, please, Kate. Confined animal agriculture is regulated by the Livestock Management Facilities Act. And permits are issued by Illinois Department of Ag. You said the unfortunate thing in our agricultural system today is there's very few options or avenues for farmers to make their farms productive. You have the basic row crops and industrial agriculture. There are a few other options, but they are definitely not mainstream or being promoted by the industry. The and controlled by industrial ag. All of the regulations are pretty well geared towards the success of industrial agricultural and not, you know, the best way to do it, which is sustainably. Next slide, please, Kate. So I'm sure everyone's aware of the slogan that we are feeding the world. Um, Technically, that is a misrepresentation of all the crops that we see growing here in Illinois. Majority of the crops that you see growing in the countrysides, and if you're rural folks that are growing around your home, are used for animal feed. Um, see, it was, I was going to say each year an estimated 41 tons of plant protein is fed to U.S. livestock to produce an estimated 7 million tons of animal protein for human consumption. As I said, that just is not economical. Another large concern is the water consumption used, especially in the swine industry. And we have a gallon per day. Technically, that's a little low. I know they figure that as an average, but even so, just for the figures we're going to use tonight, 1 gallon per hog with an estimated over 4.5 million swine being raised annually is a big concern, especially with the climate issues that we all deal with. I've had conversations with rural folks in Illinois that before a confinement moved into their neighborhood, they had plenty of water in their wells, which is another big point. The livestock industry's wells are several hundred feet deep, where residents around that who depend on it for just their daily life are, anywhere from, 20 to 50 feet is about the average. So big concern for the amount of water being consumed. by these. And of course, one of the biggest problems is that farmers don't own the industry that they're providing for. Smithfield is one of the biggest, and they are able to lobby and help the industry help them thrive while the sustainable folks continue to struggle. Next slide, please. This is just three of the big things with animal confinements are water, nutrient pollution, and air quality. I kind of already covered the water portion of it, but the nutrient pollution, of course, whether you're aware of it or not, some time ago, livestock facilities were considered and recategorized as non-discharging. And the reason for that is the blueprint for the building that they stay in has changed. So now instead of pumping or putting the manure into lagoons or ponds outside of the facility, this loophole allows them to put it in a tank and spread millions and millions of gallons of manure on our farmland under the name of fertilizer. Problems with this is it's self-regulated by the farm. They are in charge of their nutrient pollution plan. We have seen instances where that's definitely not being followed. Of course, with all that manure going on to these lands and all the tiling that's been done over the past years, a lot of times that is basically just put at the exact level when rainfall comes. It's taking the manure and those nutrients straight to the waters of Illinois. Air quality is a extremely big topic. It's been one that's hard to prove due to increased technology of the day. There are some tests and some new methods that are being used to try to measure the air quality that's coming out of these. And just for instance, I will tell you that I took a livestock managers course through University of Illinois. And in that training, there is a portion that explains that if you are an employee in this confinement and one of your colleagues is 3 feet inside the door and something has happened with the ventilation system, so there's obnoxious gas in there, they are told not to open the door and go in those 3 feet because they can both be asphyxiated, or that he can be asphyxiated before they can even get him out of the door. So all that air, when those fans quit, that's what happens to the hogs and people inside there. But yet at the same time, we're pushing all that air from these, just thousands and thousands of swine out into the air that the rural folks and everyone across Illinois is breathing. So next slide, please. Food insecurity, stunted economic growth, degraded infrastructure. Over time, I mean, we are a corn and soybean state. So due to that, a lot of the infrastructure that was used for food that was grown closer to the table it's eaten at here in Illinois, all those systems, those canneries have disappeared, and all the money, the programs are pretty much centered on the industrial ag system. Next slide, please. The Livestock Management Facilities Act, as I stated earlier, is regulated by Illinois Department of Ag. It's intended to protect our safety and protect our lands. It definitely doesn't do that. The 8 siting criteria that must be met has nothing to do really with environmental impacts at all. It's more about strength of concrete, distances from nearest residents. And that's another thing that we're hoping to address in the next year is that it doesn't, the siting language does not acknowledge property lines. So instead of it coming up to your property line, it's measured from the nearest corner of the livestock facility to the nearest corner of your house. And that creates unbelievable amount of problems. And the fact that even when they were having hearings, which we have not had any since 2019 for local comment, um, they have just increased and been able to pretty much run rampant in Illinois and put up pretty much wherever they've wanted. So some of the other issues, some of these I have mentioned, but there is a thing called animal unit calculations. This is misleading to a lot of folks. They could hear that there's 2,000 animal units, and technically that's the number is much higher than the 2,000 that they say. So it's being deceivious. Expansion loophole is one of the biggest problems that we're trying to address. It's very easy for them to come in below the number of animal units required for things such as informational hearings and get by all those regulations. And then within 6 months, they can build another building and increase their numbers without any further input or needs of change. It's just kind of like an automatic thing that it's just a process that happens. When there were public informational hearings, the county boards could only give their opinion. It was non-binding, and so that's frustrating for the local folks as well. So we'd love to be able to change that. And of course, federally, confinements of all types are exempt from the Clean Air and Water Act, which causes problems for us making changes at the state level due to those federal federal blockades, basically. So I believe that's my last slide. Go ahead and, oh, this is just a diagram of the setback distances. This was an equity. So if the setback distances for small municipalities and cities are half of what it is for rural folks. So a lot of the rural folks that I've spoke with are concerned and are curious as to why several hundred people have a different set of regulations than just a single family living out in rural Illinois. So I think there's one more slide of this that shows the difference. So the past efforts, we can go on to the next one, Kate. Thank you. Past efforts in livestock risk regulations have fallen short. It's a big topic. The industry is completely interwoven into this system. Of course, they're big and powerful and put up an incredible fight. Of course, IAC has found success in numbers. So we've actually started a coalition that meets monthly and addressing a lot of the issues that I've been discussing with you here this evening. Basically, the unfortunate thing is the only way to create change in industrial livestock is through legislation. Illinois Department of Ag does not create it. It's the legislators who build the regulations, and then IDOA follows through on those. So if we want to change, we have to convince our legislators that it's as important as it was back in the early 90s, and get this system changed and make the Illinois a healthier place for folks to live. So I think that was all right. I would ask everybody, that's the end of my presentation. I would ask that if anybody has questions, if you guys could put them into the chat. And once all the other speakers have completed their presentations, at the end, we will go through those and address them.
Chad, I'm going to throw a plug in for you here too, that if any of you or your organizations are interested in this livestock reform work, Chad is really interested in growing the coalition and figuring out where the priorities align with other organizations, maybe organizations that have missions around protecting water or advocating for rural citizens. And so he's really interested in just having one-on-ones and expanding that umbrella. So get a hold of him or drop him a line in the chat and he will get back to you and think about how to loop you in.
That's great. Thank you, Lindsay. I
Mhm.
would add, we have some national organizations which benefit us at the state level because they've been working on these things for 20 years or longer. But yeah, definitely looking for more involvement from anyone interested. So, all right. Our next speaker is Claire Ship with American Farmland Trust. And she is going to be discussing a kind of a new term in the world of agriculture, and that is agrivoltaics. And she's going to discuss a definition that they're working on. Turn it
Thanks,
over to you, Claire.
Chad and IEC team. And yeah, thanks for the invitation to be here. I'm excited to talk to you all. I'm the Midwest Policy Manager for American Farmland Trust, and I'll, yeah, just get right into it. If you want to go to next slide, Kate.
I
Maybe.
think you'll have to share on your end if you have your
Okay.
slides.
Yes, I can do. Can you all see that okay?
Yep, it's up there.
Yep, we got you.
Awesome. Sorry about that. Yeah, as Chad said, I'm going to talk about, yeah, a new term for some folks, not for others, but agrivoltaics, which is, I'll get into the definition, but in the most basic sense, the dual use of um, production agriculture under solar arrays. And so, for the title of my presentation, I just talked about bringing together people working to feed the planet and the people working to power the planet. And I feel like that's a really good representation of what I want to talk about. Um, so, for those of you who I haven't met yet, American Farmland Trust is a national nonprofit that was founded as a national land trust to protect farmland, and that was originally our mission. Our mission statement is to save this land that sustains us, but we do that in many different ways, and an increasing part of that is farm viability. And as solar development increases, and as we continue to pivot towards renewables, AFT felt like a good niche area for us is how can we make renewable energy generation work for both rural communities and farmers and for our renewable energy generation. And so that kind of parlayed into our smart solar work, which also, can you guys see this little bar here? Because if so, then you can't see my titles. No.
No, we
Okay.
can't see the bar. We can see the
Perfect.
titles.
Awesome. Thanks, Lindsay. That parlayed into our smart solar work, which is now a new division of AFT. And we have people working across the country on this, but we also have our smart solar specialist here in the Midwest, Alan Bailey, who is a farmer who lives in Springfield and has been working with solar developers and farmers for many years on this topic. And so I feel like, yeah, it's continued to produce some really great resources and tools and help us navigate this new landscape. And to do that, we developed 4 smart solar principles that are important to AFT and that we try to carry into our policy work on this area. The first one is to prioritize solar siting on buildings or the built environment when possible. How can we use our already built environment to maximize our renewable energy generation? The second one is to safeguard our soils and the ability for land to be used for agriculture after decommissioning of a solar array or underneath the solar panel. So how can we work with solar developers to make sure whenever they're putting a solar array in, that it's not harming the soil so much that it can't be returned to agricultural use if and when the project is decommissioned. The third one is to grow agrivoltaics for agricultural production and solar energy, which is what I'm going to talk about mostly today. So I won't linger there. And then the fourth one is to promote farm equity, farm viability and equity through smart solar work. So I'll talk more about how we think agrivoltaics can be a really great tool for land access, farm worker safety, and these other things that we care about. So I kind of wanted to pause here and say a little bit of audience participation. When you think about the word agrivoltaics, what kind of agriculture do you think of? What do you think can be grown under solar panels? If you want to drop in the chat, feel free. If you want to shout out, feel free. If you don't want to, because it's an evening on a Thursday, I think it's Thursday, then you don't have to. Wildflowers, yeah. Chelsea. Herbs.
Grazing?
Grazing for sure. Cool. It sounds like some of you kind of already know about this. But yeah, Lindsay Beer, I'll talk about Kernza at the end. So I just wanted to put up this slide to just demonstrate that many different things can be grown under solar panels. I think whenever I'm talking to people originally, the first thing they think of is sheep because that's what they've seen is sheep grazing under solar panels. But there's so much research happening that's helping us understand how different grains or commodity crops can be grown under solar panels, or the food that we need to feed our communities, like actual tomatoes and peppers and onions and kale and all the things that we enjoy. And then also incorporating grazing with pollinator habitat and things like that. So, and I would say, I know someone, yeah, Ed, you put goats in. I remember talking to someone about goats in solar arrays and how goats are a bit destructive, which I honestly just thought was hilarious and a funny thing to have to think of and factor in the fact that goats just want to ram the solar panel pillars. But all things to think about and why research is so important in this area. So for AFT, an agrivoltaic project has to have two key features. The first one is the production of a marketable agricultural product. So if you're not able to produce something that you can sell from under the solar arrays eventually, then we wouldn't consider that agrivoltaics because you're not continuing farm production and feeding your community or clothing them or doing some other agricultural service for them. And then the second one is the solar array has to be intentionally designed alongside farmers or other experts to ensure that the systems are constructed in a way that allows agricultural flexibility. And so if you can bring in sheep under a solar array, that's great, but we'd also love to see agrivoltaics projects be intentionally designed. So if that farmer then wants to pivot to grow kernza or to grow kale or something else under those solar panels, it's reasonably feasible that they could do that. And there's lots of benefits of well-designed agrivoltaic projects. The first one is farm viability, and I think one point to mention here, off the back of Chad's presentation, is that if a farmer receives the payment from a solar producer for the lease, they have a lot more capital to work with, and that gives them a lot more opportunity to be able to pivot, to maybe diversify their farm operation or take some more risks that they otherwise wouldn't feel comfortable doing. And so we think this is a really great opportunity to encourage farm diversification towards things like growing food for communities rather than growing food for livestock or whatever else. I also mentioned land access opportunities for young and beginning farmers. I think one problem that we've seen in solar development, especially in rural areas, is that a solar company can pay a lot more for a lease than a young or beginning farmer can. And so that can, in practice, displace that young or beginning farmer or tenant farmer. But whenever you do agrivoltaics, then there's the continued opportunity to grow under those solar arrays, and you can bring more farmers in and have smaller operations that are high value crops, producing high value crops and diversified crops, which can bring more people into the ag system, which is exciting because access to land is the biggest challenge for young and beginning farmers in Illinois and everywhere in the US. I talked about farm diversification and continued food production. And then the other thing I wanted to highlight is that putting solar panels on a farm can protect farm workers, crops, and livestock from extreme weather as the climate gets crazier. It's hot in the summers. We all know this. We live in the world and we experience it ourselves. And then imagine having to pick vegetables under the really hot sun in the summer and harvest those crops. But if you have solar panels above you, you have shade. That's one, producing renewable energy, and two, providing protection to farm workers or to the livestock that are grazing or to the crops that are trying to grow. So I think that's a really important thing to mention. So, on to the actual purpose of this presentation. AFT took on a year-long process of researching agrivoltaics definitions that have been popping up across the United States. We saw a lot start to pop up, but little clarity on like how to like a consistent definition that would create consistent and robust projects. And so, yeah, we did this process of researching. We pulled all of the definitions that currently existed in statute and in other programs, and then we wrote a definition, and then we sent it out to stakeholders across the US. That included stakeholder feedback here in Illinois. And we worked on every single word to try to make it as good as possible to make sure that if this definition was in place in an incentive program, that incentive would be truly going to incentivize agricultural production under solar arrays. So this is a text-heavy slide, but the first part is that this project has to be intentionally planned and designed with agricultural producers and/or experts, which speaks to the two components that we see of agrivoltaics projects. And then the second point is that it has to be constructed, installed, and operated to achieve integrated and simultaneous production of both solar energy and a marketable agricultural product by an ag producer on land beneath or between rows of solar panels and as soon as agronomically feasible. Point B here is really important because a farmer might be trying to establish a sheep herd, or, I mean, there are planned fallow periods in crop production. And so we want to make sure that it's done in congruence with a farm plan, but we don't want to penalize farmers for like following traditional and normal seasons and cycles. And then the third part is agricultural products and activities include, and then this is different in our normal definition, but for Illinois, we cited it back to the definition of production agriculture, which is used in Illinois statute. So we just wanted to make it Illinois relevant, and Illinois already has a definition of production agriculture, so we just tied it back there. And then I want to talk here a little bit about our exclusion of ecovoltaics. So in our definition, in AFT's definition of agrivoltaics, we do not include pollinator habitat in that because pollinator habitat technically isn't producing a marketable agricultural product. That doesn't mean we don't think pollinator habitat is important. We think it's critically important. We just think it's a different thing. And most people refer to it as ecovoltaics, and we think it's really important to separate out those definitions now because if you combine them, it makes it harder to separate them out in policy and incentive design. So I'm happy to take questions on that. I know it's AFT's stance, it's not everyone's stance. I've said here and to IEC team that we're very happy to work with any environmental group who wants to define ecovoltaics and run bills simultaneously. I think that would be really, really powerful and great. It's just that's not something that's included in AFT's definition. So if you'd like to read the definition or how we got to it, we have this report called Policy Recommendations to Increase Agrivoltaic Development. You can scan the QR code or if I can send the link in the chat after I'm done talking. But it has our definition and how we created our definition, and it also has a lot of other context around why this issue is important to AFT and what we see as important for creating a robust incentive for an agrivoltaic project, which are listed here. But I just wanted to highlight that right now we're on point one. We just want to create in statute a clear definition of agrivoltaics. The bill that we're working on, we're not trying to like take money away from any program or create money for a program to incentivize agrivoltaics. We just want to define it so everyone's speaking the same language. And we think that's an important first step to leveling the playing field. And then second, having conversations that give us the information we need to identify opportunities for new programs or incentives that are well suited to the Illinois agricultural and renewable energy environment. So just quickly, AFT has lots of ongoing work on smart solar. As Lindsay mentioned, we're growing 30 acres of Kernza under a solar systems project in El Dorado, Illinois. That Kernza is likely going to be used to produce beer, which we're excited about. And we're also doing a lot of research on how to use agrivoltaics to increase land access and farm income. Specifically, is there an opportunity for a marketing program like solar agrivoltaic grown sheep or agrivoltaic grown wool or something like that? So we're talking to partners about opportunities for that, and then researching soil health under solar projects. Legislative updates, we're refining legislative text with partners. As I said again, it's just a definition bill. It doesn't ask for any money or any other changes, just defining the word itself. And Senator Kaler has kindly agreed to carry that bill, and we're still looking for a sponsor in the House. I'm very happy to connect with any of you who would like to learn more about our position on this or this work. My colleague Samantha Levy at the federal level leads our federal policy on smart solar. And as I mentioned, Alan Bailey leads our Midwest Smart Solar research and program area. And this QR code will take you to our smart solar webpage, which has all of our many resources. So thanks. I'll take any questions at the end.
Thank you, Claire. Next is Elliot Clay, Illinois Soil Water Conservation Director, and he's going to be discussing soil water conservation district funding needs. Elliot, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Chad. Just FYI to Kate, I've got no slides. I'm gonna go off the cuff on this one. So whatever's best for the presentation in terms of zeroing all the stuff, just FYI. But yeah, Elliot Clay, Executive Director for the Association of Illinois Soil and Water Conservation Districts. I know a lot of you guys worked for IEC for a number of years. Hi, Chelsea. Good to see you. Good to see the kiddos earlier. Good to be back on here and saying hey to everybody. But I'm going to keep this really high level and just talk about the history of soil and water conservation and kind of where we're at now. Back in 1948, the Association of Illinois SWCDs was formed. Even before that, we got to a point, I'll pause for a second, back up. Everybody, I'm sure on here has heard of the Dust Bowl before. It was a major pivotal point in our history as a country. A lot of it because it came at the period of like the Great Depression and everything. But in the end, the Dust Bowl was the biggest man-made environmental disaster that our country's ever faced, and still has. There's not been anything on a scale that has happened that's even close to this. And essentially, what had happened is that we got to a point as a country where wheat production was cornerstone of where we needed to be economically. And as we entered the Great Depression and everything dropped in prices, and there had been warning signs, but farmers in the end over out west decided, if we're going to make up the losses that happened from this market collapse, we're going to have to just produce more. If half of the price of the thing we're making is gone, I guess we need to make twice as much of it to make up. And that is really what caused the Dust Bowl. It was an overplowing and an overusing of the resources that were present on the landscape. And the story is not much different than it is right now in Illinois. The prairie soil that we use to produce row crop corn and soy is second to none in the world. And I say that without any nuance. It's true. And the reason that it is because it took thousands of years of prairie and these systems of plants and wetlands and things that contributed to a soil system that allowed water to permeate through, nutrients, all these things. And it literally took thousands of years to get where we are. And as white folks and Europeans started to like settle the Midwest, they realized like, okay, there's a commodity here. Like there is something that we can produce out of this. It's going to be good. And you cut forward, 150, 200 years later, and we got to a point where we just over-tilled the whole thing. And that is where the Dust Bowl started. We realized quickly that this is not a renewable resource. It took a long time to get where we were. So how do we start protecting all this stuff? And some of that came from FDR and all these other people that were in the federal government at that time, trying to think through like, if we're going to protect this stuff for future generations, not just from an environmental perspective, from like an economic one, we've got to put some stuff in place that makes sure the stuff stays put, that we're not just using it and thinking that everything's going to be hunky dory, because it's not. So SWCDs were kind of a byproduct of this. They realized that the federal government can't be everywhere at one time. They need to have local folks that are on the ground looking at everything. And soil and water conservation districts were kind of the answer. It was people that lived locally, that knew the landscape and knew what needed to be done in order to protect it. And back in the 30s and 40s, the federal government's put a call out to a lot of the Midwestern states saying like, hey, figure out a process for getting us in touch with these people so we can get programs on the ground and do the things that help protect these resources. Because in the end, it really is a national security kind of thing, from the sense that a huge basis of our economy is based off of the ability to grow all of these commodities for other countries, not just us. And it was a big deal. And you cut forward to 2023, 2024, 2025, and we've started to lose the message a bit. The federal government in recent years has done a really poor job of supporting conservation efforts at the local level through the USDA and other programs. And soil and water conservation districts in Illinois and all the surrounding states were set up to deliver those programs. And unfortunately, for better or worse, we've wound up in a scenario where, the federal money is drying up a little bit. And at the same time, the state side is not recognizing what's going on. So where we're at as an organization, and I represent the association that kind of oversees the whole kit and caboodle of the whole thing, and trying to figure out like, where do we go? Where is there funding that allows us to be able to teach farmers and other folks about the practices that keep nutrients on the landscape, keep erosion from happening, all these things. And we've had a couple of bills the last couple of years that have tried to do this, but at the same time, I think we're at a moment generally where, how do we engage more of the public about what soil and water conservation districts do? Right now, there are 97 districts that cover all 102 counties in Illinois. And that is spread thin quick. We got $40,000 or $40 million in the, or not 40 million. Let me back up. $4 million in operations money from the state General Assembly this last year, and that equates to, for 97 districts, that's about $40,000. And ideally, we're supposed to have 2 people at every district doing all this stuff, and it's not tenable. And I'll just close with this. We're at a moment in time where we have seen dust bowls, or not dust bowls, but like dust storms happen in central Illinois and in Chicago. A few years ago, we had a major one happen in central Illinois, just a few miles from where I live, that led to a number of people losing their lives on I-55 and millions of dollars in property damage and a lot of other things. And then last year, a few days before the General Assembly got done, there was another major one that happened and went all the way north of Chicago. It was the first one that happened there in decades that was that scale. And yeah, I see comments that remember that. Yes. And it's, I gotta say, I would not be surprised if it happens again next year. And if we're going to stop this from happening repeatedly, we need to start investing in how we keep this stuff in the landscape. And I'll just say this: I appreciate everybody on this call, because I know that you know, the environment is very important to everybody here. But this is a problem that, even though it's located in downstate agricultural Illinois, is something that really impacts everybody in this state, and it will continue to. So with that, I'll shut up for a minute and hand it back over to our other presenters, but happy to answer any questions later.
And Elliot's going to stick around too if there's questions in the chat to answer over there in the chat too. Thanks, Elliot.
Yep, thank you.
I didn't have like a giant hook to come pull you out of screen as I try to hustle everyone onto time.
Thank you, Elliot. Well, we'll quickly move into our next priority, our last priority, which is local food systems. We have a duo for this. Ed Dubrick and Kira. I'm not sure who wants to go first, Ed or Kira.
I can go ahead and go, and then I'll tee it up for you, because I'll talk just very briefly on GFPP and then pass it off to the expert. So, oh, looks like I got a request to share slides, but let's, I don't know who the Zoom host is. Here we go. Okay. We'll skip that one. All right. So I hope you guys can see these. I'll try and get the Zoom boxes out of the way. We're working on a few things this year. Some of our primary campaigns, we're going to open back up a farmer's market permit that we passed a few years ago. We've been on the books for a few years now, and we know that there's some cracks, I'll say. So we're looking to get that open back up, fix some things, redefine what the definition of a farm is. And long story short, this will make it easier for vendors of meat, dairy, and eggs, as well as those that are doing producing food items in a commercial kitchen, to be able to sell across county lines. We're also tackling some federal things here, the Strengthening Local Processing Act. Chad talked about this earlier, but when you're not into that very consolidated, very vertically integrated livestock sector, and you're trying to produce local meat outside of it, it can be hard to get processing. So this bill would fund, give federal funding for state meat inspection, for grants for small and very small plants to expand, and also do workforce development. So that way they have, you know, qualified employees to hire and do that work. And then the next thing here, we're looking at getting involved in some antitrust or anti-monopoly type legislation at the federal level. Not exactly sure where that's going to shake out yet, but we realize that there is a groundswell of interest among the populace right now at taking some action at some of these large corporate companies, often foreign owned, very similar to what Chad talked about earlier, that control and dominate our food system and make it hard for other players in it to frankly be competitive or even survive. We've got a few other campaigns here. You know, I think most folks on this call likely know that there's been cuts to SNAP funding. And so we want to be able to keep our finger on the pulse that should Illinois decide to respond to any of that, that we have the opportunity to engage on that and make sure farmers' voices are heard in that. We have a lot of farmers in our membership who benefit from the double up bucks that happen at farmers markets, where a SNAP recipient exchanges $20 of their benefits and they get $40 to spend at that farmers market. So it really makes their dollars go farther, helps keep those food dollars in local economies, benefits farmers, eaters alike. That way they're getting fresh, nutritious food. This other campaign is also going to look at, you may be familiar with the Local Food Purchasing Assistance Program, or in Illinois, it was called IL Eats. Farmers like myself and many others across the state were able to raise products and sell them at a fair market value to food banks. And those food banks were reimbursed by IDHS and IDOA via a USDA cooperative agreement. There's a couple of bill numbers here. Currently, bicameral, bipartisan support on these. Folks are realizing that these were, you know, very necessary programs that really uplifted both ends of the food system, from farmers to our most nutrition insecure. Another thing we're going to be looking at, we know that this is going to be a tough year in Springfield for budget conversations, as they all are, but we have a feeling this one's just going to be a little bit tougher. So we're wanting to just hold the line on some existing grant programs that benefit our members. The Local Food Infrastructure Grant, which dedicates funding to that middle of the supply chain. So not on-farm production, not retail sales, but everything in the middle. So whether that's distribution, aggregation, processing, etc., to help rebuild some of this infrastructure that's missing. You know, as you drive across the countryside, every small town has a grain elevator, but very few of them have a butcher shop, a cannery, flour mill, etc. So how do we get some of that back? Through funding like this. The next one here is $2 million for the Growing Growers Fund. It was formerly called the Socially Disadvantaged Farmers Grants, but this puts funding out there for technical assistance and for grants for, you know, historically socially disadvantaged farmers, especially those that reside in food deserts, to try and build back some of that production and keep farmers feeding their communities. We've got a handful of things that we're going to keep our pulse on, but we likely aren't advancing policy in 2026. Just things we want to watch. We would like to explore improving the Illinois Ag Invest program ran through the Treasurer's Office. From what we can tell and their data, it appears that most, I'll say, conventional agriculture producers are the folks who benefit from this. So are there some tweaks here that we can make that will make it easier for producers of local food or regenerative farming practices to access this state's lower interest loan program? We're going to continue to explore solutions that drive soil health practices. We'll be talking with Elliot frequently on how we can get some more money back into SWCDs. We know pesticide drift is an issue for many of our farmers. Farmland access, as Claire talked about, is a crucial issue, and right to urban farms. So zoning and water accesses in, you know, in urban environments. So these are things that we don't fully have a solution on, but we're going to keep our pulse on, keep researching, keep working with our members to identify things that we can advance in the future. And then up next, we have a multi-year issue that we've been working on with Kiara and the good folks at Illinois Food Justice Alliance, the Good Food Purchasing Program, and I'll pass it over to her because she's the expert and I would just screw it up if I tried. So glad she's on the call.
And don't make me laugh. It's good to see everybody. So I'm Kiara Jackson. I am the director of the Illinois Food Justice Alliance. I'll try to talk quite briefly about the good food purchasing policy. As Ed just mentioned, it has been a multi-year legislative battle that we've been trying to get through the finish line. So I'll give some background into what GFPP is. And I'll start it with some context. So as y'all know, Illinois spends millions of dollars each year procuring food for public institutions that include state agencies and facilities. But quite often, big corporations, they secure huge food contracts, and those contracts usually come with no accountability for their labor standards, sustainability measures, fair wages, or humane practices, only the lowest bid. But what we know is that it doesn't have to always be this way. So the Good Food Purchasing Program, it provides a national metric-based framework that helps public institutions align their food spend with community values. And their food spend is literally our taxpayer dollars. So we should have a say in where and how their food spend is being used. The five core values are local and community-based economies, environmental sustainability, valued workforce / worker well-being, animal welfare, and community health and nutrition. And then I'll briefly talk about what it could look like in terms of benefits if we were to get something like this passed. So one, we would be able to keep dollars within our local economy. So this would boost farms and food businesses so that public dollars circulate within our communities, and also expand opportunities for historically marginalized producers, hold suppliers accountable, so demanding transparency in food contracting so that institutions are not kept in the dark when suppliers violate labor laws. Protecting worker well-being, institutions, would have a better say-so in who and how they source from producers and vendors that provide safe and just working conditions and fair compensation for everyone along the food supply chain. And then also to improve public health so that to ensure that food that's being served in state agencies or facilities is nutritious, fresh, and culturally affirming, strengthening the food security, reduce our reliance on unstable global supply chains, and build resilience against future crises such as pandemics and other climate ones that we will more than likely see. And then to also ensure that animals are treated humanely, so sourcing from producers that provide healthy and humane conditions for farm animals. As of right now, we don't have any plans to introduce in 2026 a statewide bill to integrate values-based practices and approaches into procurement systems. Instead, we're going to be looking to introduce a GFPP commission bill, and it will be quite similar to the GFPP task force that's currently adopted. And essentially, the task force's job is to review GFPP and see if there is a way that it can be implemented on the state level. And the task force members happen to be procurement officers, some state legislators, and these procurement officers are from state agencies and facilities, and then also nonprofit organizations that closely align with at least one of those five core values. And so our goal with trying to introduce a commission bill is so that we aren't restricted to the time-bound restrictions that are coming up with resolution. So therefore, the commission won't be disrupted as typically the task force is due to the time-bound restrictions that a resolution provides. And I'll also drop into the chat my email. If you guys have any questions, I'm more than happy to set up a call and talk more about our work.
Thank you, Kira. Great presentation. All right, we're running just a few minutes over. I appreciate all of our presenters. If there's any questions, we can start addressing those now. If you have any, please raise your hand or just come off either way.
I just want to say really great Zoom.
Thank you, Tommy. We appreciate that. Well, if no one has any questions, I will thank everybody for coming to the Priority Town Hall this evening. I especially appreciate our presenters and the excellent job that they did on presenting the priorities that we'll all be working on next year. And Alexandra, please feel free to reach out. I can share my email here.
Oh, Chad, I see one question
Oh,
in the
did I miss
chat.
one? For Chad and Elliot. Alexandria, go ahead.
Oh, they may be having connection issues. I know that, like, if you want to get connected with us, go to our Facebook. We've got, or our website, aiswcd.org. I'll put it in the chat really quick. We're going to have a lot more opportunities for folks to participate in our legislative side of all this stuff and everything else. But I'll put it in there. But thank you all.
All right. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your evening.